A thick fog blankets the slopes of Glastenbury Mountain. The twisted silhouettes of trees rise through the mist like silent witnesses, while the cold wind hums a sound that almost feels alive, whispering secrets of people who vanished without a trace. Imagine walking alone through these forests, the crunch of leaves beneath your feet, knowing that others, hunters, hikers, students, even a child, once walked the same paths and were never seen again. Welcome to the Bennington Triangle, an isolated region in southwestern Vermont where, between 1945 and 1950, at least 5 documented disappearances occurred under circumstances that defy all logic. These weren't isolated accidents. Each case seemed to deepen the mystery, blurring the line between human error, natural danger, and something far stranger. In this story, we'll journey through every detail: who these people were, how they vanished, what was found, and what never was. Some explanations sound rational, others don't. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? What city or country are you in as you step with me into the fog of the Bennington Triangle? The Bennington Triangle isn't an officially mapped triangle, but a region named for a cluster of eerie disappearances and legends. It centers on Glastenbury Mountain, deep within the Green Mountain National Forest of southwestern Vermont, surrounded by the small towns of Bennington, Woodford, Shaftesbury, and Somerset. In the early 1900s, Glastenbury was a ghost region, a failed logging and mining area, abandoned after floods and deforestation destroyed local industry. By the 1940s, nature had reclaimed it. Steep slopes, overgrown trails, freezing winds, and sudden storms that could swallow a person whole. Reports from the Vermont Historical Society described the mountain as isolated, unpredictable, and unnerving. Local folklore even warned that the mountain was cursed, a place where compasses failed and people felt watched. Whether coincidence or curse, this landscape's combination of wild terrain, poor visibility, and lack of access made it the perfect setting for the disappearances that would soon follow, and the mystery that still haunts Vermont today. Long before the modern mystery began, the native Abenaki people who lived around Glastenbury Mountain warned that it was a place of strange winds and restless spirits. Oral traditions described it as a cursed region, a land where the 4 winds met, creating unpredictable weather and luring travelers astray. Some Abenaki elders told stories of a stone that swallows people, a place on the mountain where anyone who stood upon it would vanish forever. These legends, centuries old, now sound eerily prophetic. By the early 20th century, settlers and loggers working near Glastenbury reported unnatural silences in the forest. No birds, no insects, only wind. One miner wrote in an 1897 letter now kept in local archives. Superstitions grew that the land itself was alive, capable of confusing compasses and disorienting even experienced woodsmen. As the town of Glastenbury collapsed economically and its remaining residents left, the area turned ghostly. Empty cabins, abandoned rail lines, and a decaying logging town added to the unsettling atmosphere. So when people started disappearing in the 1940s, the locals already had a name for the feeling they couldn't explain. The mountain doesn't give people back. The first documented disappearance that drew statewide attention happened on November 12, 1945. The victim was Middy Rivers, a 74-year-old experienced woodsman and hunting guide who knew Glastenbury better than almost anyone alive. Rivers led a group of 4 hunters up the mountain for deer season, confident as always, moving faster than the rest of the group. As they descended near the Hell Hollow Brook area, he walked a few steps ahead and was never seen again. The others thought he'd simply gone back to camp first, but when they returned, Middy was gone. Days of searching brought nothing. No footprints, no rifle, no clothing, no scent trail for the dogs. According to the Bennington Banner, Nov. 1945 edition, Hundreds joined the search, and even military personnel assisted, but the forest gave no clues. Investigators theorized he fell into a stream or deep sinkhole, but no physical evidence ever surfaced. What made it chilling was that Rivers wasn't a naive hiker. He had survived storms, hunted that terrain for decades, and carried matches, a compass, and his rifle. For the people of Bennington, this was the beginning of something much darker. A whisper that the mountain had taken its first victim. Exactly 1 year after Midi Rivers vanished, another disappearance struck Bennington. This time shocking the entire state. On December 1st, 1946, Paula Jean Weldon, an 18-year-old sophomore at Bennington College, decided to go for a solo hike on the famous Long Trail, a path that cuts across Vermont's mountains. She was cheerful that afternoon, dressed in a bright red parka, blue jeans, and lightweight sneakers, not ideal for the freezing weather, but she seemed confident. Several witnesses later confirmed seeing her. One at a gas station near the trailhead, another along Harbor Road, where she asked for directions. A middle-aged couple even recalled watching her walk ahead of them on the trail, turning a corner, and then vanishing. When she didn't return to her dorm, classmates grew concerned. By morning, the entire region was searching. The governor offered a reward, and even the FBI got involved, but not a single trace was ever found. No footprints, no body, not even the red coat. The case received national headlines, and for the first time, Vermont realized it lacked an organized state police force. The investigation's failure led directly to the creation of the Vermont State Police in 1947. But Paula's mystery was never solved. 3 years later came what many locals still call the strangest disappearance in Vermont history. On December 1st, 1949, James E. Tedford, also spelled Tiford in old reports, a 68-year-old veteran of World War II, boarded a bus in St. Albans to return to the Bennington Soldiers' Home, where he lived. He was last seen sitting quietly by the window, reading a small booklet as the bus made several stops. Passengers remembered him clearly at the stop before Bennington. But when the bus arrived at his destination, Tedford was gone. His belongings were still on the seat, an open bus timetable, a suitcase in the rack above, and his ticket neatly tucked into his pocketbook. Yet no one had seen him stand up or leave. Police confirmed he never got off at any stop. It was as if he had vanished into thin air between stations. Newspaper articles from the Bennington Banner, December 1949, documented the bafflement of both police and passengers. No foul play was ever proven, but his disappearance added a new, chilling dimension to the Bennington Triangle. This wasn't deep wilderness anymore. This happened on a crowded vehicle in plain sight, without a trace left behind. By October 1950, tension already surrounded Glastenbury Mountain. People in Bennington had begun whispering about the curse that seemed to take someone every year. Then came the disappearance of Paul Jepson, an 8-year-old boy whose story would deepen that fear. On October 12, 1950, Paul accompanied his mother, who worked as a caretaker for a local dump near the mountain's edge. She left him briefly inside her truck while she tended to the animals, only about an hour. When she returned, the door was open, the boy was gone, and the only sound was the rustle of leaves. Search parties were organized immediately. Bloodhounds were brought in and picked up Paul's scent, which led them toward a nearby road, and then suddenly stopped, as if the trail had been cut off mid-path. According to reports from the Bennington Banner, October 14, 1950, police even dredged nearby streams and ponds, but no trace was ever found. Theories ranged from abduction to animal attack, but the abrupt end of the scent trail, as though he'd been lifted off the ground, baffled investigators. Even stranger, Paul had reportedly told his parents days before that he wanted to visit the mountains. For many locals, it was an eerie echo of the other disappearances, as if something up there had called him. Just 16 days after Paul's disappearance, tragedy struck again. On October 28, 1950, Frida Langer, A 53-year-old woman described as a seasoned hiker and camper was spending the weekend with her husband and cousin near the Somerset Reservoir, part of the same wilderness area tied to the previous vanishings. During a short hike, Frida slipped into a shallow stream, soaking her clothes. She told her cousin she'd quickly return to camp to change and meet them later. The walk back should have taken less than half an hour. She never arrived. Once again, large-scale searches were launched. Helicopters, soldiers, firefighters, hundreds of volunteers scouring every inch of the terrain. Nothing. No footprints, no fabric, no clue. Then, 6 months later, on May 12, 1951, her body was found in an open area that had been extensively searched before. The decomposition was so advanced that the cause of death couldn't be determined. Investigators couldn't explain how her remains ended up in a spot already combed multiple times. According to the Vermont State Archives, her case was officially ruled unsolved, closing the series of disappearances that haunted the region for over 5 years. Locals began calling Glastenbury Mountain the mountain that swallows people whole. While the 5 main disappearances are the most documented, historians believe they might not be the only ones. Local police reports from the early 1900s mention a hunter named Carl Herrick, who vanished near the same area in 1897, nearly half a century before the Bennington Triangle became a legend. Herrick's body was later discovered in a clearing, surrounded by strange signs, his rifle still loaded beside him, and large animal tracks pressed into the mud, reportedly bigger than any bear known to the region. The coroner could not determine a clear cause of death. Decades later, a handful of hikers claimed to have gone missing for short periods, hours that felt like days, marked by confusion, disorientation, and what some described as the forest shifting around them. These accounts, while harder to verify, reinforce the mountain's fearsome reputation. Even now, regional police occasionally receive reports of hikers vanishing temporarily or emerging miles from where they entered. Whether those experiences are psychological, environmental, or something stranger remains unknown. What is clear is that Glastenbury Mountain's history of missing people extends far beyond the post-war years, forming a pattern that suggests the phenomenon wasn't just coincidence, but something deeply rooted in the land itself. When investigators and journalists began comparing the disappearances, a disturbing pattern emerged. All victims vanished between 1945 and 1950 during the colder months, late fall to early winter, when weather was unstable and daylight faded quickly. Each case occurred within roughly a 10-mile radius around Glastenbury Mountain. Most victims were last seen alone, separated from their group by mere minutes. And in almost every case, search dogs lost the scent abruptly, as if the trail had been cut from the air. No bodies were found except for Frida Langer, whose discovery 6 months later only deepened the mystery. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no clear tracks, just empty silence. Reporters from the Bennington Banner noted that it was as though the earth had opened and swallowed them whole. Statistically, the odds of so many unsolved vanishings within such a small, rural area over a short period are extraordinary. For locals, this was enough proof that Glastenbury was cursed. For skeptics, it was a case study in how isolation, poor weather, and human error can combine to create the perfect mystery. Either way, by the early 1950s, the legend of the Bennington Triangle had already taken on a life of its own. To understand why Glastenbury Mountain became such a source of fear, you need to look further back, long before the disappearances began. The Native American tribes that once inhabited the region, particularly the Abenaki, avoided the mountain entirely. Their oral traditions described Glastenbury as a forbidden place, where the 4 winds met in conflict and where the spirits never rest. According to their legends, a stone circle near the mountain's peak was said to swallow anyone who stepped inside it, a natural vortex where time and direction lost meaning. When European settlers arrived in the 1700s, they dismissed these warnings as superstition and began to log the forests and build small settlements. But by the late 1800s, the town of Glastenbury had already collapsed. First from economic ruin, after logging stripped the hills bare, and then from strange, violent accidents. Historical records show numerous cases of workers vanishing into the woods, only to be found days later disoriented or speaking incoherently. By 1930, the town had been officially disincorporated, leaving behind only ruins, abandoned railways, and whispers of something lurking in the wilderness. So, when the disappearances began in the 1940s, locals didn't see them as isolated events. They saw them as a continuation of a much older curse. As the disappearances piled up, so did the theories, ranging from rational to utterly bizarre. Some experts pointed to the rugged geography of the Green Mountains, steep slopes, sudden weather shifts, and thick forests that can disorient even experienced hikers. Others suggested the area might be home to dangerous wildlife, such as black bears or mountain lions, though no signs ever matched known animal attacks. Then came the paranormal explanations. Residents claimed to see strange lights in the woods at night, moving in unnatural patterns, vanishing instantly when approached. Others reported hearing voices echoing through the trees, though no one was nearby. Folklorists compared these tales to the infamous Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, another New England region plagued by disappearances and unexplained lights. There were even accounts of UFO sightings around Bennington during the late 1940s, coinciding with the same years as the vanishings. The strangest theory, however, came from a retired ranger named Carl Mason, who claimed the mountain might conceal a natural magnetic anomaly capable of interfering with compasses and disorienting people, a claim supported by several documented cases of compass malfunction near Glastonbury. Whether coincidence or something beyond science, every theory only seemed to deepen the darkness surrounding the Bennington Triangle. Among those who volunteered to help in the searches during the late 1940s were hunters, forest rangers, and even local veterans familiar with the terrain. Many of them returned with stories that were never officially recorded, but became part of local folklore. One volunteer, George LaFountain, claimed that while combing the forest during the search for Paula Weldon, his group found a strange, perfectly circular clearing where no sound existed, not even the wind. They described an intense feeling of dread, so powerful that several men refused to step into it. Another searcher later wrote anonymously to the Bennington Banner, stating that he had seen a flash of red cloth deep in the woods. Paula's jacket had been red. Yet when they reached the spot, there was nothing but moss and dead leaves. Over time, many who joined those searches began avoiding the mountain altogether. Some were said to have developed recurring nightmares about whispers in the forest, describing voices calling their names in tones eerily similar to people they'd lost. While it's easy to dismiss such accounts as exhaustion or suggestion, what's harder to explain is how several unrelated volunteers told nearly identical stories, separated by years, but united by that same fear of something unseen watching from the woods. By the early 1950s, Bennington was no longer just a quiet Vermont town. It had become synonymous with fear. Businesses near the mountain saw fewer visitors, hikers stopped coming, and locals began warning outsiders to stay off the trail after dark. Psychologists who later studied the case noted how collective trauma can shape a community's beliefs. When the same small town loses multiple residents to mysterious vanishings within 5 years, fear becomes folklore, and folklore becomes identity. Teachers reported children refusing to walk home alone. Others drew pictures of the mountain monster during class. The town's post-war optimism faded, replaced by anxiety and superstition. Newspaper editorials debated whether the disappearances were linked by something human, a serial killer perhaps, or whether they were simply a coincidence magnified by hysteria. Yet even the skeptics couldn't ignore the unease that lingered. Former Ranger Raymond Whipple told a 1955 interview, "You can stand up there on Glastenbury and the forest goes quiet like it's holding its breath. You feel watched, not by an animal, but by something old." That quote became famous locally, printed on postcards and tourist brochures. A chilling reminder that even those who didn't believe couldn't escape the mountain's shadow. Although most of the disappearances were treated as isolated incidents, declassified local reports from the Vermont State Police and a few unearthed memos from the U.S. Forest Service hint at something deeper. After Frida Langer's body was found in 1951, the state requested federal assistance, specifically for aerial reconnaissance and terrain mapping using early photographic methods. Curiously, these records show that the data collected from the Glastenbury region was never publicly released. Some historians believe this secrecy was due to simple bureaucratic inefficiency. Others suspect that the images revealed anomalies the government preferred not to explain. Several witnesses also recalled seeing unmarked aircraft flying over the forest at odd hours in the early 1950s, years before private charter flights were common in Vermont. Officially, authorities stated the planes were part of logging surveys. Unofficially, townsfolk claimed they saw bright spotlights sweeping across the slopes, accompanied by a low humming noise that locals described as not like any plane we'd ever heard. Whether government research, early Cold War experiments, or just a misinterpretation of military flights, the timing was suspiciously aligned with the end of the disappearances. When reporters later filed requests for the photographs, they were told the files were lost during archival reorganization. To this day, none have resurfaced. Anyone who has hiked near Glastenbury Mountain speaks of its eerie quiet. A silence so total it feels unnatural. Birds stop singing, wind fades, and even the crunch of leaves seems muted. Biologists have proposed several explanations. The unique acoustic topography of the valley, low-frequency wind tunnels, or even the lack of certain wildlife due to overlogging in the 19th century. Yet countless hikers claim that the silence feels intentional, almost as if the forest itself is listening. One 1972 expedition, led by naturalist Ellen Sykes, recorded sudden magnetic fluctuations on compasses and audio tapes, picking up unexplained low-frequency vibrations. Sykes later described the sensation as standing inside a vacuum that breathes. Many believe this silence contributes to disorientation. The human brain, deprived of natural sound cues, loses its sense of direction. But others insist it's something else, a presence, subtle yet undeniable, that makes trespassers aware they are not welcome. Even those who dismiss the supernatural admit the silence of Glastenbury can feel oppressive, like being inside a sealed cathedral deep in the woods. Whether it's nature, science, or something older, the mountain's soundless breath remains one of its most haunting mysteries, the living heartbeat of the Bennington Triangle. Even though the string of vanishings ended in 1950, strange incidents in the Bennington Triangle never truly stopped. In the decades that followed, hikers and campers continued to report bizarre lights, missing time, and unexplained disappearances of equipment. In the summer of 1984, a group of college students camping near Somerset Reservoir claimed to see a floating sphere of orange light, hovering silently over the treetops for nearly a full minute before vanishing without a trace. Their photos, blurry but consistent, were analyzed by the Vermont UFO Research Center, which classified them as unidentified aerial phenomena. Around the same time, 2 experienced hunters became lost for nearly 36 hours. When found, they were dehydrated and confused, swearing they had been walking for only a few minutes. Their watches had stopped at exactly the same time, 3:47 p.m., the moment they claimed the forest went completely silent. Such stories continue even into the 2000s. Park rangers still receive annual reports of hikers hearing voices calling their names, only to discover they were alone. Despite technological advances, GPS, drones, satellite imaging, Glastenbury remains a place where logic frays. Something in that refuses to let go of its mystery, as if it's guarding a secret too old to reveal. What makes the Bennington Triangle so fascinating isn't just the disappearances, it's the magnetism it exerts on people. Each year, researchers, paranormal enthusiasts, and true crime fans travel to Vermont hoping to uncover something new. Psychologists have suggested this attraction may stem from what they call liminal fascination, humanity's draw toward boundaries between safety and danger, the known and the unknown. The triangle embodies that threshold perfectly. Even skeptics who visit the mountain often describe feeling a pressure in the air, a strange combination of awe and anxiety. For the locals, the attention is double-edged. Tourism brings money, but it also reopens old wounds. Families of the missing still live in Bennington, and every autumn, journalists appear to rehash the same questions that have no answers. Yet somehow, the legend endures because it feeds on both fear and wonder. Every new generation feels the same curiosity. Could it happen again? And every step into the forest feels like a dare. Whether you believe in curses, magnetic anomalies, or coincidence, the Bennington Triangle reminds us that some places carry memories. And those memories can pull you in, even when you think you're just looking for the truth. Not everyone accepts the supernatural explanations. Over the years, skeptics and researchers have offered logical interpretations for nearly every part of the Bennington Triangle mystery. Geologists point out that the Green Mountains are riddled with hidden sinkholes, abandoned mine shafts, and unstable soil layers created by 19th century logging and erosion. A person could easily vanish in those conditions without a trace, especially in freezing weather. Meteorologists note that sudden snow squalls and fog banks are common in the area, creating total whiteouts that can confuse even skilled hikers. Psychologists studying the phenomenon describe how isolation and sensory deprivation in deep forests can trigger temporal disorientation. People lose track of distance, direction, and even time. Many also cite confirmation bias. Once a few vanishings were publicized, later events were interpreted through the lens of a curse. Still, even the most rational voices can't fully dismiss certain patterns, like the dogs losing scent abruptly, or bodies never being recovered despite intense searches. As Bennington College professor Donald Babcock once said, "Science can explain the woods, the wind, and the weather, but it can't explain why this mountain makes people disappear in silence." It's that sliver of unexplainable mystery that continues to defy logic and invite obsession. In 2008, hikers exploring a ridge near Bickford Hollow, the same area where Paula Weldon vanished in 1946, made a chilling discovery. Inside the hollow trunk of a birch tree, wrapped in a decayed canvas pouch, they found what appeared to be a small field journal. Although most of the pages were water damaged, several entries were legible. The handwriting belonged to an unknown man who described camping alone by the mountain and feeling followed by something unseen. The final pages grew increasingly erratic. "The forest watches, it remembers, it moves when I don't look." No name, date, or identifying details were found. The Vermont State Police later analyzed the paper and ink, determining they were at least 5 decades old, roughly matching the timeline of the original disappearances. Though the journal was never conclusively linked to any missing person, its discovery reignited public interest in the case. Some researchers speculated it might have belonged to a lost prospector or surveyor, others that it was a hoax planted by someone aware of the legend. But to locals, the eerie tone of those final words felt all too familiar. Another echo from the mountain that refuses to stop whispering. Hikers who visit Glastenbury Mountain today often describe a strange phenomenon. The forest seems to change shape. Trails vanish overnight, landmarks shift, and GPS readings sometimes loop back on themselves, showing hikers walking in circles even when they're not. Experienced mountaineers have claimed that their compasses spin aimlessly or point due north, regardless of direction. Scientists from the University of Vermont's Department of Earth and Environment studied the area in 2012 and noted that the region's magnetic readings fluctuate more than in most parts of New England, possibly due to subterranean iron deposits. But the locals have their own explanation. They say the forest resets itself. It remembers the intruders, one guide claimed, and rearranges the paths to push them back out, or deeper in if it chooses. This belief, though unscientific, echoes eerily with multiple hiker testimonies who swear they retraced the same stretch of ground for hours only to emerge miles away. Whether an illusion caused by geomagnetic anomalies or something more sinister, the mountain's terrain seems to behave like a living entity. As one visitor wrote in a 2018 blog entry, "You don't get lost in Glastenbury, it gets lost around you." In more recent years, a controversial idea has gained traction among fringe researchers and paranormal enthusiasts, that Glastenbury Mountain could be home to an interdimensional rift, a thin spot in reality where people might accidentally slip through. The theory isn't unique to Vermont. Similar claims appear in cases like the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, Point Pleasant in West Virginia, and even Dyatlov Pass in Russia. Proponents cite the consistent disappearance pattern, the lack of remains, and the reports of time distortion. Physicist and paranormal theorist Dr. Arthur Mandel, in a 2015 symposium, argued that the area's unusual magnetic readings and infrasound frequencies could hypothetically create sensory distortions that make it seem as though reality bends. Skeptics dismiss this as pseudoscience, pointing out there's no empirical evidence for dimensional portals. Yet, what keeps the theory alive is the sheer number of eyewitnesses claiming to have experienced time loss or geographic anomalies within the triangle. One 2003 camper reported that his analog watch ran backward for several minutes while inside a fog bank near the mountain's base, and returned to normal after he left. Whether science will ever prove or disprove such theories remains uncertain. What's undeniable is that Glastenbury continues to act like a place where the natural and the impossible collide. In the autumn of 2019, 73 years after Paula Weldon's disappearance, a pair of hikers exploring near Bickford Hollow, the same path she vanished on, found something that reignited local obsession with the case. Tangled in the roots of an old maple tree was a scrap of faded red cloth, brittle but unmistakably aged. The hikers turned it in to authorities, who sent it to the Vermont Crime Lab for analysis. Initial results confirmed the fabric was wool, consistent with the jacket Paula was last seen wearing in 1946, but DNA testing was inconclusive due to decades of exposure. Still, the story spread like wildfire. Local papers ran headlines such as "Paula's Ghost Returns" and "The Mountain Gives Back Its Secrets." Tourists began flocking once again to the site, hoping to glimpse the spot where the discovery was made. Skeptics argued the fabric could have come from any old garment, yet the coincidence was undeniable. It had been found within 200 yards of where Paula was last seen. To those who believe Glastenbury Mountain keeps what it takes, the idea that a piece of her jacket resurfaced after 7 decades felt like the mountain's whisper, a reminder that it still remembers. For centuries, Glastenbury Mountain has been seen as alive, not metaphorically but consciously aware. Hunters refuse to camp there overnight, hikers report feeling stalked, and even seasoned rangers describe the unsettling sensation of being followed without sound. Modern campers have posted online about seeing figures between the trees, tall and motionless, always gone when approached. Infrared trail cameras placed by paranormal groups have occasionally captured unexplained heat signatures, human-shaped but cold, showing no body temperature. Skeptics dismiss these as glitches, yet the emotional weight of these encounters feels genuine. People who leave the Bennington Triangle often describe an overwhelming urge to never return, as though the mountain leaves a mark on those who enter. One anonymous Reddit user who claimed to have camped near Glastenbury in 2021 wrote, "At night, I heard footsteps circling my tent. But every time I turned on my flashlight, nothing, just the silence again. These experiences blur the line between psychological suggestion and something else, something watching, waiting, patient, whether it's the echo of old trauma, magnetic interference, or something truly supernatural. One truth persists. In the Bennington Triangle, you don't simply observe the forest observes you. Today, the Bennington Triangle stands not just as a stretch of forest, but as a living legend. A place where truth and myth have fused so completely that separating one from the other feels impossible. Tour guides, hikers, and ghost hunters visit every year, drawn by that uneasy promise that maybe, if they're lucky or unlucky enough, they'll feel what the missing once felt. The mountain has become a monument to uncertainty, where science, faith, and fear all intersect. Town historians say tourism spikes every autumn as travelers come to chase the story, while locals still hang talismans or leave offerings along the trails to keep the mountain calm. The ruins of old Glastenbury, overgrown by moss and birch, now serve as eerie landmarks, reminders of the settlement that vanished long before the disappearances ever began. On foggy mornings, hikers claim to hear the sound of a train that no longer exists, a phantom echo of the 1800s logging line that once cut through the hills. Whether coincidence or memory, it's as though the past refuses to let go. And perhaps that's the true curse of the Bennington Triangle. Not that it devours people, but that it never allows them, or their stories, to truly leave. If you ever decide to visit Glastenbury Mountain, locals will tell you a simple rule: never walk alone and never ignore the silence. The forest will seem peaceful at first, still, green, eternal. But if you stand long enough, you'll feel it. The pressure in the air, the stillness that hums. It's not imagination. It's the mountain breathing. Some say that each missing person became part of that breath, absorbed into the woods, watching every new visitor step where they once walked. Scientists can debate anomalies, historians can trace records, and skeptics can reason away the tales. Yet, the feeling remains. At sunset, when the mist rolls in and shadows stretch long, even the most rational mind hesitates before taking another step deeper. Maybe it's instinct, maybe it's memory, or maybe, as the old Abenaki legend warned, it's the mountain itself, calling you closer, waiting to see if you'll listen. So, if you ever find yourself on the long trail, standing where Paula Weldon vanished, take a breath and look around. And if the forest goes quiet, don't move. Because on Glastenbury Mountain, the silence is not empty. It's alive. And it's listening.